Okay, guys, welcome to the second part of this SAML training. Sorry for rescheduling 3 times altogether so far. And the original intention of this part 2 was, and that goes back to last time when I gave this training, the audience was mostly on-site. So we put together a hands-on lab and have people actually do everything live. But now since this time around is mostly remote, and that's why I asked you guys to sign up for your own Salesforce account to not only go through this training, but also down the road it will be very helpful. But not only that, but we will also need a Centrify tenant to configure the SAML app on Centrify side, right? So with both sides, we complete the integration. So I'm not sure how many people have actually succeeded getting an account and then also access to the Centrify side. So what I'm going to do for this session, part 2, is the training materials are still a complete hands-on exercise that you can follow to complete the integration. But since we are doing live, I'm just going to show you a live configuration from scratch, almost from scratch. Okay, so let me go through the material first, just more kind of like a dry run. So this one is specifically configuring IDP, initiate a single sign-on to Salesforce. I hope you guys will retain the diagrams that I showed you from last time, particularly the SP initiate a single sign-on workflow and the IDP initiate a single sign-on workflow. In this case, to Salesforce, IDP initiate a single sign-on workflow is exactly half of the workload of SP initiate a single sign-on. So we are gonna set that up first, then we will move on to configuring SP initiate a single sign-on, or we'll look at how it works in the next session. So this materials are for you. This first thing, of course, sign up a Salesforce Developer Edition account. And then the second part is to getting ready to configure a SAML. Like we'll need information from Salesforce side. For them, they have written like a lot of documentation. I know that this screenshot is a little small, but if you can look at it, like this single sign-on session, there are a lot of many subtopics, which they actually covered a lot of things that you can read and learn about. We won't be using all of it today, and which you'll see in a minute. But that's what I want to show you. And I'm not going to make you guys read in the live session. So the 4 things that I want to point out is just these 4 that we'll come back and visit. And then that's what the screen's going to look like. So that's on the Salesforce side. Now on Centrify side, we'll be adding a custom SAML applications. And then right after that, that is where the information exchange happens between the two, IDP and SP. And there's some more details that I'll go over. And then after that's all said and done, configuration is done, then we'll be able to make a test by launching the application. So that's the plan for today. So I know some of you guys have the accounts already, so you can try this later. So with the live configuration demo I'm going to show you, let's do that now. So I borrowed a Centrify tenant, and I've logged in as the cloud admin already. And then I have my Salesforce account, which this time around I actually used Gmail to sign up. Okay, so this is part 2 of the slides. That once you have account now, in this scenario, we as a cloud admin, like we actually have access to both sides. Well, of course, for us Centrify, we will always have, or we'll better always have configuration on Centrify side. But on the other side, in this case, we have control of it too. So we get to see everything on both ends. So there are two ways to go to the single sign-on settings page. One is, since Salesforce have implemented this quick find, you could simply enter single, and it will show the result for you, and single sign-on setting is where we want to go. Or, for whatever reason, if it's any faster for you, you could navigate to settings, identity, and single sign-on settings is the last option. So clicking on it, this is the single sign-on settings page in Salesforce. Now, for an account that has never had SAML enabled, we need to enable that. So simply click on the edit button. There's only this one option to be set. Check it, save it, back to the screen, it's checked. Simple. Now here is the actual SAML configuration down here in this session. And one thing to point out is Salesforce supports multiple identity provider. So after we set one up here, by the end of this session, if you ever have the need to set this up to another test environment, you can actually click new and set up another one and just go through the same step to do the same. So for this case, this is the first one in my test account. Click new. So this is the configuration screen, specifically to one identity provider. So all these fields, right, with name, issuer, entity ID, IDP certificate, IDP login URL. So these are some of the terms that I told you guys in the last session. Okay, so this is the screen on Salesforce side. Now, what about on the Centrify side? Like, how do we integrate to a SAML service provider? We go to Applications, and then Web Applications. Click on Add Web Apps. Now, for those who don't know, this is our app catalog. There are some applications templates already here, but in this session, I'm going to show you how to use custom. And why that is important is because these application templates, or most of SAML application templates, these are made after going through a successful integration with a service provider. And so we figure out some of the we figure out some of these SAML configuration settings that have to be added, and we pre-configure it in these templates. So by using that, it gets you, some step closer to the complete integration. But in many cases, for developers, if you ever need to integrate with a new service provider, or in support's case, some customer may have their web applications that support SAML, but Centrify has never integrated with them, right? And that's where we use custom. Another important thing that custom SAML app template is actually the most powerful, meaning anything that, I should put it this way, the SAML app template in the app catalog is really not only the pre-configured value, but also it's like a subset of custom. So anything like an app template can do, a custom can do the same with the same input. So that's what I want to show you, is how to configure a SAML from scratch using our custom SAML app template. So once you add it, it's going to look like this. And the first tab is just about settings, where you can set like name and description, upload a prettier icon if you want to. And then the meat of the SAML configuration is really in Trust tab. And Trust tab goes by two sections. Top and bottom, the top section is identity provider configuration, and the bottom one is service provider configuration. And how to use this is, Centrify, we are IDP, right? So these identity provider configuration is where now you see some of these values already generated for you to use. If you have to, for any reason, change the values, you can change that. You can change the IDP entity ID value. You can choose a different signing certificate, and so on. And after configuring the values here, we'll be providing service provider these values, which we'll see in a bit. Now here on the left side, there are two options. One is metadata, one is manual configuration. So like I have said in the first session, at the end of the day, it is all these pieces of information that matters, right? Entity ID, certificates, URL, and there is a medium called metadata that would make the information exchange easier. So we actually provide all methods, right? Not only manual, but also metadata in 3 formats. For service provider that wants a URL, here it is. Comes with a copy URL button too. If they want a file, here's the download metadata file button. If they want only the contents of the XML file, we have that too. So just to show you, that's the XML. Very compact. Oops. And then the second bottom is service provider configuration, meaning for information that service provider gives to us for us to configure. If it comes in pieces, then we do same thing, manual configuration, and enter them one by one. Or if they provide a metadata in different format, then we can do that too. So today, I'm also going to show you the manual configuration, because I want you to see the actual pieces, and not necessarily, right, the easy way. In fact, after this, then when you get to use metadata, then you'll appreciate, because it's faster. Okay, so now once we have both sides ready, and this is going to the you have already seen this, but I put in my slide deck this side-by-side view. Okay, and we are really just doing exchange between the two. And moving on to the next session, and we are ready to do this. So let's do this. So going in to Salesforce SAML configuration, from top to bottom, right, it wants a name. So just enter the name that later on you could come back and know this is your configuration. Again, because Salesforce supports multiple, right? Meaning in the last screen, right down here, when you have multiple, and in my test account, I actually have close to 10 now. So you want some names that you can tell on that list that this is your configuration. But for today's purpose, let's just call it Centrify. The next thing is ask about this issuer. And right next to it, there's also this entity ID. So that's where the question comes in, hey, IDP has issuer and entity ID, SP also has 2. When we are asked just these two, like which one are they referring to? So there'll be a question to service provider, in this case, Salesforce. And I'm gonna show you, so this is what I just clicked on, is the help on this page link at the corner, and it will bring me to the SAML documentation. And what I said earlier, they have many sessions, but I'm just gonna go straight to where it points out to me that, guess what, when they call it issuer on the screen, it is referring to the entity ID for the identity provider. Meaning, in this case, is the IDP issuer that I want. So what I need to do is to, from Centrify side, this SAML application, copy this IDP entity ID, And by the way, the first time you come here, this is collapsed, so click on this arrow to expand it. And then put it here. Okay, then by that, well, there's got to be SP entity ID, but what value do we use? Like, does Salesforce have any instructions? And there is. In the next step, it says, I'm not going to read the whole thing. Pretty much just for now, this is the value we're going to use. Until you have like additional domain setup, then that will be different. So this step is actually somewhat interesting because, right, this value is defined by service provider, Salesforce, which is still true. They tell us what to use in the instruction, but we have to enter it here just because it might change. That's okay. Okay, the next thing it's asked is IDP certificate. So this one, it is asking for the signing certificate, which by default, every cloud tenant has a default certificate, signing certificate. It even tells you that too, bracket default. If you, for any reason, or if customer wants to, like, use a different one, then you can upload a new one and use it. Once you set it, then back here, you click on the download button, and it will download the cert file, particularly the public key part on this. Okay, then going back to Salesforce, just choose that file. And they shorten it, but you can see that that's the file that I just selected. So that's good. Moving on, for these two, leave it as is. The reasons being, we do not support validation of a signed SAML request at the moment. And therefore, whatever settings are set here, it actually doesn't matter because we don't validate the signature in SAML request. The next one is assertion decryption certificate. Right now, for the first time, keep it as assertion not encrypted. This is actually an additional setting that if you want to play with it, that's fine. We actually support this feature, but I wouldn't do that until the basic SAML is configured and working. So let's just leave that as not encrypted for now. Then for the next piece, SAML identity type. This is a settings in Salesforce that it actually allows you to say, hey, where in the SAML response I'm going to look for. I'm sorry. When Salesforce gets the identity value in a SAML response, how should Salesforce map that to a Salesforce user? For now, just leave it as the first option contains a user's Salesforce username, meaning in our emails earlier this week, during the sign up, I pointed out that the username of the Salesforce user, right, could be different from an email address. And part of that is because that is the Salesforce username that you're going to use and you're going to map. So in my case, and we'll see that again, is my account, this user is, my Salesforce username is terry.fog@gmail.com. So when we configure the SAML response coming out sends out from Centrify to Salesforce, we'll need to make sure like that is the username. Then the next one is about, hey, where in the SAML response Salesforce should look at this username. And do you remember when I showed you the SAML response XML last time, there was this element called name ID inside the subject element block. So that's what this is referring to, the name identifier. So keep it that way. If for any reason anyone wants to send it out in a SAML attribute, we can do that too. But that will take additional configuration, really just that little bit, which I can show it to you in the next session, but let's not do that just yet. The next one, now some service provider allows you to choose when it sends out a SAML request, what binding do you want? In this case, it doesn't really matter because Centrify supports both. If they send in from post, we can read it, redirect, we can also read it, so just leave it at post for now. And the next piece is asked about is the identity provider login URL, which comes from IDP, of course. And that is the single sign-on URL. So by now you should have noticed there are some terms that are not matching exactly, right? Because these are pretty much like general terms. That's why the purpose is when you see something like that, you need to know what the function of that piece of information. That will tell you directly what we need. So in this case, a single sign-on URL, I copy that and paste it here. And custom lockout URL, custom error URL, single lockout enable, just-in-time user provisioning. This is something I'm not covering in this part. I could come back and talk about those later. Those are also additional SAML options. So let's once again get the SAML single sign-on works first before we explore to additional options. And as far as SAML configuration in Salesforce, this is it. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking, but as you could see, it's really just copying like 4 pieces of information from Centrify. So let's save what we have. This will bring you back to this screen with what you have just configured. The interesting part here is at the bottom, there's this section called endpoints. And the first most important one is this login URL. This, and if you read the documentation, it will tell you, this is your assertion consumer service URL, which we'll need to bring it back to Centrify. Okay, but that's done on the Salesforce side. Now, let's go back to Centrify side, going down to the service provider configuration. And like I said, I want to show you manual. Right? The manual configuration are asking these information. So the first one is SP entity ID, which we actually know from earlier that is now this one. So we simply copy and paste it. ACS URL. And that is now generated here. And by the way, in Salesforce, this ACS URL that they call login URL under endpoints, these are not generated until after you finish configuring IDP. So just so you know, I mean, don't worry, when you come here today and start asking, hey, where's the ACS URL? You might not see it just yet until you have configured these. But after you have it, and copy and paste it in Centrify. For other configuration below this point, these are, most of the time, default values are fine. The one that I would, actually 2, that I would spend some time on talking about is the sign, response, or assertion. This is something that a service provider would tell you whether they want the signature block in response or assertion. Then you just choose the corresponding one. Name ID format, if service provider requires a certain format, they will and they shall also tell you which exact format they are looking for. And like I said last time, well, the default is unspecified. If an SP does not specify which name ID format to use, then well, use unspecified. And so here is the encrypt assertion feature that we actually supported. And if you need to use it, then this is where you will enable it and then upload an encryption certificate. So some other settings are also, if you need to set it, like SP will tell you what to set. In this integration, there's only these two that matters. And well, since we're here, I'm also going to show you SAML response tab. So SAML response tab comes after the trust tab. As you have seen, most of the configuration happens in trust. But now, if a SAML integration requires any attributes, this is where you set it. This tab also comes with two sections. Top and bottom. Top section is the attributes, so specifically to set SAML attributes. And the bottom is the custom logic, which formerly is known as scripts or advanced scripts. This is where you can do things that if, let's say, for example, depend on a user type, you need certain things to happen or use a different audience value. Like I'm just totally making that up. Then this is where you can enter, like if-else statement, even for loop to do what you need to do based on your business needs. So in this integration, we actually don't need to use these. So there's nothing to be done here. Then as far as SAML configuration goes, this is it. We have the information from IDP to SP, and information that's from SP to IDP, we have also just done that. Okay, so now we actually, no, that's one more thing, account mapping. So account mapping is where you configure what the name ID value is going to be. So I talked about that earlier, that for me, my account, my user, the user's name is terry.fog@gmail.com. Right? So right now with the default settings, which will get the value from the user principal name attribute, and I can actually show you this. So with this configuration right now, you can use the preview button to see what it looks like. A lot of noise here. Okay, fine. I'm just going to eyeball it a little bit. So here's the name ID element, right? So right now it is getting the user principal name of my logged in user, which is just Cloud. Right? Now, in a normal scenario, I would have a user, right, inside Centrify Cloud that will have a value terry.fog@gmail.com. Either that is actually the UPN or is an email address. That's what this tab is trying to control. So, but for the first time integrating, I would always say, hey, you know what test user you're going to use. So let's just use that first. We can always come back and reconfigure this. But once again, for the sake of getting the SAML configuration works first, let's just set the test user to be the one that you know. Okay, save that. And now if you come back to SAML response using the preview button, so now it will always use this one. Right? Because of that configuration of this SAML app right now, it doesn't matter which Centrify user logs into this portal and launch this application, it will always be this one, just because of this settings. So once again, I'm doing this just for testing purposes in a real-world scenario. After you clear the function, the configuration, come back and set whatever it is supposed to be. Give some better names. Okay. So that's SAML configuration and the mapping of the identity value. Now, one more thing in our application, so you guys probably know this already. We need to deploy these applications to users. And for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna deploy to myself. Okay, so now it's deployed. We are ready to make the test run. So back to the Web Apps tab, right? So this is my SAML application that I just gave the name, Salesforce SAML. And for extra value, I'm opening a tracer, which I'll talk about in the next session. Okay, so I'm about to launch this application. And one thing to make sure before you make a test is that you are actually logged out from service provider, right? Otherwise, if you had already logged in, authentication did not actually happen because it wasn't needed. But then it looks like your SAML single sign-on succeeded. So it happens very fast. What you just saw is I launched the SAML application and it logs into Salesforce as myself. I think Salesforce like Chrome better. Anyway, but what just happened, right? So that's what I kind of want to show you the trace, is that when I click on the SAML application, and behind the scene, it takes our configuration in, generates a SAML response, and sends it to Salesforce. Okay, so here is where we put all the pieces together, including those that I told you guys about in the first session. Okay, top to bottom, this is a SAML response. We are sending it to the ACS URL that Salesforce gave us, that we have set in the Trust tab. Issuer being this SAML application with this unique ID. And the signature block, this signature, well, most of this certificate here. This certificate is our IDP signing certificate, which is the default of this tenant. And then in the assertion block, IDP issuer shows up again. And here's the subject block with the name ID being me, right, by the account mapping configuration. And here's the audience value with the SP entity ID that we have set, that was given by Salesforce. And there was a couple other things that we, since I talked about the name ID format being unspecified, so that shows up here. Okay, then when this was sent to Salesforce ACS URL, then Salesforce does this validation. And signature is good. Look at the user, terry.fog@gmail.com. It was able to find a user, and therefore it logs me in. And life is good. So that's the end of this IDP initiative single sign-on configuration and demo. As you can see, during an integration, most of the time I spend, figuring out the pieces and then put it together. And once it's said and done, then it's, like a, all right, this is like magic. The process only happens in not more than a few seconds. Any questions so far?
Yeah, I'm using still the older tenant, but when I go to click actions, I don't have the launch option. I can confirm that it's deployed, it's all configured, I have the permissions, but I don't have launch.
You said it's deployed, right?
Yeah.
What I found out last week was I don't get the launch option when the app is not deployed. So if you are seeing deployed and you're still not getting that, I actually don't have an answer of why that is not showing up.
If it's a legacy tenant, I think you still need to switch to the user portal in order to launch these applications.
Oh, okay. I'll try that one sec.
But when you say old, what do you mean by old? Like legacy?
Like I'm using the oh, okay.
But if that is the case, then yeah, Sarah is right. You need to go to, I think that's Sarah speaking, by the way.
Yes,
and that's the same thing for Adaptive, is you will have to launch it from user portal.
Yeah, I just did that and that worked. If that launches it, you just have to go to the user portal, go to apps, and then click on the SAML app, and then it will automatically launch it from there.
Yep, there you go. Cool. Any other questions? If not, well, that's all I have to show to you guys today. Once again, for those who have accounts but haven't gone through the exercise, I'm going to send Chris Jones this slide, and you can follow the step. I really just did what I have written down here. And as you can see, it was actually, well, for this one, it was actually easy. There are actually not many pieces involved. There could be more, but you know, this is the basics.
Terry, real quick, just a quick question regarding troubleshooting, maybe I missed it. I was testing on my tenant. If anything is broken, what is the best tool that you recommend? A Fiddler trace or?
That is something I intend to go over next session. Okay. But since you asked, I'll give you a preview. So this tracer you just saw me use, this is an add-on in Firefox called SAML Tracer. And what I really like about it is, well, not only it traces enough of the traffic that you know I care about. I mean, well, Fiddler is all good and it shows a lot of things, but sometimes you know I don't need too many things, too many noise. More importantly, this tool actually decode SAML messages, and it will flag it to you too. So you don't have to if you use in Fiddler, then you have to look into, hey, ACS URL or IDP login URL. Okay, that's my URL. Then I look on the right side, see the SAML response in base64 encoded. Then I need to bring this to another tool to decode it to see the content. This tool does it all. This tool first flag it for you. Hey, I see some SAML traffic here. And you click on it, and it will give you this SAML tab, and it will show you the content of the response, as well as the request, if there is one. So this is my favorite. In some cases, sometimes, you know, on customer call that they don't prefer to install any plugin in their computer, then we would fall back to use, say, Fiddler or whatever other, there are other network tracer that could achieve the same thing. So I'll go over those tools and options next time.
Awesome, thank you.
And Tim Ganchi is adding notes that
that's awesome.
Add-on for Chrome as well. The extension is called SAML Chrome Panel. I got to try that. Works similar to the one that I just showed you. There are others. That's just one he is sort of familiar with. Okay, so yeah, we'll talk more about that next time.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Terry.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, Terry. See y'all.
Hey, Terry, where are they sending out the recording for this? Or Is it going to be posted somewhere?
Chris will be posting that. And when I
Okay.
get the link, I'll send you the link. Actually, he has already given me the link.
Okay.
Hey, Terry,
So,
what about your slides?
I'm going to send that to you right now.
Okay.
I'm going to send it to Chris, and Chris will post it on this conference page.
Great.
All right. Thanks, Terry. This is pretty helpful.
Good. You're welcome. Any more questions? If not, this is it.